Mississippi. We welcome to the program now, calling in Alyssa Arbuckle, Multimedia Journalist, SuperTalk Mississippi News. All right, there you go. When you hear that sound, you know we got the news on the air. It's Alyssa Arbuckle. Well, it's been a rather eventful week, shall we say, Alyssa. Tell us about the election results. I think one race got called just yesterday, the lagging race of all those that were contested on Tuesday. Give us the latest on that.
Well, we had a lot of things going on. We stayed up here for the entire election coverage, got out late. Really impressive results by Presley and Reeves, in my opinion. As everybody knows, Reeves is reelected for another term. He's the incumbent governor, and he ended up with a 51.5% gain of votes. He had over 400,000 votes, whereas Presley came up with 47.1% of votes, which was pretty close, but I think it was an impressive end result so far.
Yeah, so one of the races that just got called yesterday was for Public Service Commissioner for the Central District, and that one was ultimately called by the AP for the challenger, DeKeither Stamps, taking on the incumbent Republican Brent Bailey. That was pretty close, right? About 2,000 votes or so separated the candidates. What's the latest?
So I saw an interview on WJTV, and I thought it was really interesting. DeKeither Stamps, he's a Democrat. He publicly invited the former incumbent, Bailey, over to his house for a beer. And I don't know if you saw this, but Bailey did not respond very excitedly to his request for the invitation. He said he wasn't quite sure about it and that he was kind of disputing the claims of, you said that I was a corrupt politician, taking illegal briberies and donations, and it didn't exactly endear me to the opponent right at this moment because there's no fact basis on that. So not quite sure if they're going to hang out afterwards, but...
Interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Yeah.
So there's been some feedback from Mr. Presley. He didn't just go away quietly, having lost the election on Tuesday. He, just within the last 24 hours, he on Twitter, X now, I guess, although Rhino says it's still Twitter. A few things that a loss, this is what he says, Mr. Presley, a few things that a loss will never shut me up on. Number 1, Medicaid expansion. Number 2, ethics reform. Number 3, restoring our right to vote through the ballot initiative. And number 4, getting the sales tax off of groceries. I'm going to be worse than the thorn in the Apostle Paul's side on these issues. So he hasn't gone away.
He has not, and he has not denied the fact that he has not ruled out rerunning in 2027. I also thought it was interesting yesterday on the Gallo Show with Lucian, we had Vicksburg Mayor George Flaggs on, and he said some interesting things about, maybe, he thinks that Presley would be a great head, a great chair of the Mississippi Democratic Party. And he said that's something that he would be interested to see if it would happen, But we've had Shake Taylor. He just started in July after Tyree Irving resigned, that same month. So I'm not quite sure if they would have that quick of a turnaround. But, I thought it was interesting that, George Flaggs is over here saying, what if Presley ended up being the face of Mississippi, at least for the Democratic Party.
Well, it could be, and I think he's got the personality and the experience and the energy to serve in that role. Honestly, I think he would be effective in that role. I'm not so sure how much that would change the overall political landscape from the standpoint of who's serving in office and who gets elected. I kind of had him figured for a position somewhere in the Biden administration. Of course, that would only endure for a year plus a month if Joe Biden, unless Joe Biden is reelected. So that's kind of what I thought. But I don't think he just goes away. I really don't. I think he stays around the political scene. He's been in it his whole life.
He has. He's been started, in politics whenever he was right out of college, mayor, of his own hometown. So I think it would be interesting if it did happen, in my opinion. And that was something that I personally hadn't considered. But after listening to what George Flaggs had to say, I was, I don't know if Presley would start to consider it as well. I'm not even sure if he's thought about that avenue.
What about turnout? It appears that this year's turnout, this cycle's turnout, is going to fall short of the turnout in 2019 by what, Rhino, 50,000 votes, I think is what we calculated. I'm not sure if the final
I think it may be a little more than that, but yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of disappointing. We had Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann on and discussed it with him, and really nobody seems to have any answers. Nobody can really put their finger on the reason for the rather light turnout. Well, certainly declining turnout. We thought 19 was a low turnout, and now we've even exceeded that in terms of dropping.
I thought it was interesting. I mean, that, everybody's saying it was a low turnout because we had a lot of, ballots that were, missing, not missing necessarily, but people ran out of ballots in a couple of places. Before the election, I tried to go vote, and I was, walked in, and they were saying that they were out of ballots and that you're going to have to wait 2 hours. And I was like, well, if it takes, 2 hours, it takes 2 hours. You have to vote. And so to hear that, there were a lot of ballots that were run out, but still a pretty low voter turnout. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it is. Of course, there was a lot of buzz around that, keeping some precincts open in Hinds County a little later than the 7 o'clock ending time, and that was just because there were lack of ballots at some precincts. A judge ordered that those polling places stay open for at least another hour. Have you heard any sort of buzz, any discussion about possible legal action in the wake of those few anomalies that occurred in Hinds County?
I know that there were some appeals, and there were a lot of speculation about who was going to do the lawsuit. Then it ended up, they said, okay, well, 9 o'clock, like we'll keep it open until 9 o'clock, and then it ended up being 8 o'clock, and then everybody was really wondering, mostly was if you got in, at 7:01. And nobody was sure if they were going to stay open until 8 o'clock. If you got in at 7:01, is your vote still going to count? And there was a lot of confusion, a lot of speculation about, how that was all going to go out, and just wasn't a lot of communication to figure out what the rules were going to be last second. And so for all the voters out there who weren't able to vote or weren't very, weren't informed and weren't very it wasn't very clear to them. I really feel for them because it's just it's hard. You want to go out and vote, and then if you go out there and it's 7:01, you lost your chance. What if,
Yeah. So I'm being told on the C Spire text line the AP has not yet verified the results of Stamps Bailey. But okay, but somebody's called it. I heard this from two different sources yesterday that are reliable. I thought somebody called it at this point, so maybe I misunderstood that.
It hasn't been officially called yet, but I know that WJTV, at the end of their article, they were talking about the invitation, but they said it is close to being called. It might be called soon. Okay.
Well, 96% of the precincts in, I think, are the votes counted, which it's been hovering at that number now for almost 3 days. I don't get it. How come that number? Do you have any idea why that 96% isn't incrementing upward?
Well, right now they have a difference of 3,259 votes. So if yesterday it was 2,000, then it's increased by a little bit.
Okay.
And that's some, headway, fortunately.
So something's going on. All right, Alyssa, appreciate you coming on and giving us the rundown. We'll talk soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Folks, we're coming right back with more in the Element Well studio down at the Mississippi Armed Forces.